Welcome back, troglodytes, to the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today we have my absolute favorite reissue that Gibson has ever done. The 1968 first run Goldtop reissue. You're gonna notice this Les Paul has a crown on the headstock. Yeah, kind of like an SG. What's the story behind this? Let me tell you. This is actually a mystery that has only recently been solved by a guy who loves the 60s Les Pauls. So imagine a guy like me, how I am with like the Super Customs, the Les Pauls, and other limited edition Norland eras, but transfer all that love and knowledge and documentation into the late 60s, and that's what that guy represents. So his website is late60slespauls.com. and you can find lots of good information on those rarities there. But the story behind the crown has always been shrouded in mystery, but we need to do a little bit of history to fully understand this. The Les Paul, first introduced in 1952, went through a bunch of different changes until the bursts came out in '58. And then in 1960, those bursts weren't selling well, so they decided, okay, let's just make a double cutaway, completely change this all, and then was birthed the SG. Now the SG was still called a Les Paul for a few years, and then eventually the Les Paul name was dropped and SG stuck. That stood for solid guitar. So a Les Paul did not necessarily exist from like 1961 through about 1967. Now, yes, there's a few custom orders here or there, but as a general rule of thumb, you won't find them between those years. So 1968 rolls around. It's essentially because Les Pauls were being picked up by a bunch of famous players, because back then they were cheap, but then they saw, oh, there must be a market for the Les Paul again. So Gibson decided to reintroduce the Les Paul Custom and the Les Paul Standard in the 56 style with P90s in it. Now, this style of Goldtop only lasted about a year. Drastic changes start to happen between 68 to 69 because that's kind of when Norland really starts taking over and changes things. That's when you got things like the three-piece neck, the pancake body. They take the small headstocks, they make them large. Then the P90s get ripped out for the Epiphone mini humbuckers, and the Deluxe is born. So my holy grail Les Paul Deluxe, I finally found one, the blue sparkle top. I got to document that. But this guitar, now let's talk about the crown. Why does this guitar have a crown? It's a Les Paul. It's not supposed to have that. It's supposed to say Les Paul model in a silkscreen on it. The Les Paul was just now being reintroduced, and only the first run of these Les Pauls being reissued got the crowns. So people thought, well, maybe they were in negotiations with Les, and he was like, maybe you need to pay me more money. But then they decided to make these to show them, hey, we don't even need your name on this to sell them. Some people hypothesized that maybe they forgot how to use silk screens, or they lost the original Les Paul Model 1, and they didn't want to have to design a new one. And some people also thought, well, a lot of those are seen overseas, so maybe that designated the export model. What's the actual truth? Somebody just messed up some paperwork. The mythical, legendary crowned headstock 68 Goldtop has to be Gibson's biggest blunder that they've ever done. So apparently, when they're manufacturing these things, they follow a process. And one of those processes is part numbers. So the headstock veneer that was correct, the one that you're supposed to see on this model, the silkscreen that says Les Paul, is number 28-102. Somebody accidentally put number 28-106. And it wasn't until the second week in June of '68 when that mistake was caught and corrected. Here you can see the product change form for that. So only the very first Les Paul reissues got the crown on the headstock. And one of the originals, I would love to document it. But the day that I saw this guitar get posted on Gibson's Instagram, I knew I had to make a video about it. I had every intention to rush down and make a Wyron out of this guitar, but for some reason, it didn't happen. I forget what happened, but I was so happy the day that I was able to get this guitar because this is so cool. This is the coolest reissue they've done outside of the Sparkle Top Deluxe. I mean, sure, R8s, R9s, they're great and whatnot, but this is such a piece of history. It's kind of obscure. Not everybody knows about it, but now they do. But they did this for the 50th anniversary. Because 1968 through 2018, when these things were made, they were just celebrating them. They did a gold top like this in vintage original spec, but then they also did a heavily aged version, which I think looks absolutely terrible. But they limited these to 68 in production, you know, playing off the whole 1968 thing. So these kind of became instant collectibles. They sold new for $4,699, but what makes this different from like an R6? Because typically an R6 is referred to as a 1956 Les Paul reissue. It's got two P90s, you've got an ABR1 bridge. I mean, this looks very similar. Well, first off, you have the crown. That's only, once again, specific to early 1968. They have a Les Paul truss rod cover. It just says Les Paul, not standard or anything, or even being blank. We've got double ring Kluson style tuners here. The bridge saddles on these will be nylon instead of metal. Your knobs are a little bit different, but you know, that's the main differences here. But I mean, what makes this different from a regular Les Paul is you also have hide glue construction, you know, the way they were built back in the 50s. Some people say that really changes the way the guitar feels. I've only had two guitars that I'm aware of that used hide glue that were reissues, and both of them were fantastic. The other one was that painted over guitar. It might not have been everybody's cup of tea the way it looked, but it played fantastic. And I'm happy to say that this is probably the happiest I've ever been with a P90 Les Paul. I loved the Queen of Clean, but this one, it just kept inspiring me to play. It sounded great clean, it sounded great dirty, it had some nice growl to it. This was a fantastic guitar. I was super happy with it, but part of that's just me bonding with the features of this instrument. So now that we've talked about this guitar and its history, let's go ahead, tear it apart, and look at its parts. Alright, inside the 68 reissue. My absolute favorite thing about looking in the cavities of these old styled guitars with P90s is that they're always happy to see you. So the long neck tenon makes the mouth, and then the two P90 screws makes the eyes. It's just a funny little characteristic there. But it appears the pickups are nothing special in these, it's just the P90 soap bar. But you can see they were made in late 2018. And something else you can't necessarily just appreciate from photos and whatnot is the P90 routes are custom fitted to how tall the pickup needs to be. See how this route is actually very shallow? I mean, look, my finger hardly even goes in there. Whereas for the neck pickup, it is much deeper because the pickup needs to sit deeper. So this makes it so you don't have to use any foam blocks or any type of springs. This is what the covers look like, and on the inside you can see the code, which is UC452B. And this is what the pickup itself looks like on the inside. In the neck pickup position, we have a 7.81 k ohms reading, and in the bridge, a 7.74. And just for fun, in the middle, 3.88. This does utilize a Gibson ABR1 bridge with posts drilled directly into the body, but the big thing for this one is the nylon saddles as they used on these original 68s. And here's what the tailpiece looks like. This is a very, very lightweight aluminum tailpiece. Almost nothing to it at all. As for the knobs, we have the gold bonnet reflectors that say volume and tone, and you also have the thumb bleeders that point to which position on the knob you're at. This is what it looks like without the pickguard on it, and then with it back on. So we have our traditional maple top with a mahogany body, And then we have a mahogany neck with a rosewood fretboard. Nothing too special going on here, but we have a nice dark piece of rosewood that I just conditioned. The frets were polished. The truss rod cover itself reads Les Paul, which is kind of a vintage correct thing, which I really appreciate. And then the ever so glorious crown emblem on the headstock with the double ringed clusons. This is just such a beautiful look. We have a 1.69 inch nut width, which increases to 2.04 inches by the 12th fret. First fret neck depth of 0.89 inches, which then goes to a chunky 1.01 inches by the 12th. And we have the traditional 24 3/4 inch scale length. With the back control plates off, we can see the inside pots. I believe they refer to these as the Black Beauty caps, so they reissued those for this run of instruments. And here you can see the toggle switch cavity as well. These shipped with both this version as well as a commemorative medallion. We have regular styled strap buttons, a plastic output jack plate, and here's a really cool feature. The 68s, I guess they have a different heel to them. I'm not really an expert on late 60s Les Pauls, but that's definitely one feature that when I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, definitely know that. But I just love the mahogany they used. It's a little bit light in color, but it's almost kind of got like a creamy toffiness to it. That's especially prevalent here on the neck. Now the tuners they used, again, they're the double ring clusons, but they say Gibson Deluxe on them. And then they gave it a 68 styled serial number that is impressed into the back of the headstock. They used some really choice mahogany on this one. That's a solid body guitar at 8 pounds, 3.6 ounces. Now that we know what the inside of this instrument looks like and its specs, let's go ahead and hear how it sounds. The case that these come with is actually pretty cool. It actually doesn't have any Gibson branding on it at all, except for this little metal right here. It says Gibson Custom. So they were trying to stylize this after the 60s cases that this would have came in. So it gets this golden leaf material here. I think it looks pretty cool. Good heel support, double neck rest. Inside this little compartment here sleeps all this case candy. So you get a special certificate of authenticity booklet. You can see it matches the toggle switch medallion plate. Then inside it reads 50th Anniversary 1968 Les Paul. They give you a vintage looking hang tag here that talks about the Gibson guarantee, as well as polish and strings. You get a pre-packed checklist here, a Gibson social media card, some reissue styled pics. I think these are pretty cool. And a really awesome piece is a replicated Gibson Gazette here. I'm sure this is based off of something that was like handed out with the original 68s. I mean, it's got a really vintagey feel and look to it. It's just beautiful. But it's basically a reissue of the pamphlet that introduced the Les Paul coming back. So very cool. Thank you, Troglodytes, for tuning in today. I'm not going to go over the condition of it because it's pretty much brand new and it's not really for sale. So I hope you enjoyed learning about the mythical crowned headstock Les Paul 68. And we will see you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.